Hi, my name is Sean Cook, and this is my video presentation of my research paper titled Religious Socialization. So, everybody comes from different backgrounds. We all have our own story to tell. Essentially, we become who we are through a process called socialization, which is a term that is used by sociologists to describe the process of acquiring knowledge, values, and behaviors that contribute to a person's identity. Throughout this presentation, I'm going to be looking at how certain aspects of growing up in a religious home or in a religious background affect individuals and a social aspect. So I'm going to go through a couple topics to include family influence, the education system, and what life is like for adults that grow up in religious homes. So our families are the people who we tend to spend the most time with. So it kind of goes without saying that a large part of the socialization process we experience while growing up is via our families and our family life. And we learn things from basically every family member, whether it's aunts, uncles, parents, siblings. Um, so they all contribute to the socialization process. And children, um, they often continue on with the ideas and the beliefs that they grew up with. And religious socialization is something that is largely carried out by the family unit, coupled with education and interaction with their peers. So, like I said, we're all heavily influenced by the way that we were raised. And some people, they continue with the morals and the values that they learned growing up, well into adulthood and even for the rest of their lives. And it's interesting to see how our upbringing influences the socialization process, and more specifically, people who grew up in homes that practiced some sort of religion. Marie Cornwell did a study that basically stated that research generally suggests that the family is the most important agent of religious socialization. Um, so she's basically saying that, you know, there could be lots of reasons, or agents in this case, that impact the religious socialization of individuals, but none is more important than the family because that's where a majority of our influence comes as a child. So, as we'll see later in the presentation, you know, there are other agents that affect the religious socialization process. Um, so there's a lot of things to take into consideration when looking at the family influence. One factor is the how active the family is in their religious practice. Is it something that they do regularly? Is it just something that they do on holidays? Um, if you grew up going to church, multiple times a week as opposed to only on like Christmas and Easter, chances are, it's something that you're going to carry on with you into adulthood. Um, so, we're heavily influenced by family members in many aspects of our life, and religion is really no exception. Um, Going back to Marie Cornwell, she stated that individuals acquire their worldview through the socialization process and by continued interaction with others. So, what she's saying is we gather our views, and in this case, our religious views, from our interactions with our family members. So, not only do we acquire our religious views, but we also sustain these views by continuous interaction with relatives and our religious institutions. Um, you know, we learn a lot from our families and especially our parents. Children who grow up in religious households go to church because their parents go to church. Um, the children often see going to church as something that's normal because they don't know any different. We see socialization through religion due to family influence, um, and in this case, parents. The religious affiliation of the younger generation is far rather the result of religious upbringing at home than the conversion in later life. That was a quote from Paul Vermer's study in 2009, and he's basically just saying that, religious affiliation is more connected to an upbringing and religious practice than it is something that people convert to later. So moving on to the education, um, it plays a major role in religious socialization um, because it goes hand in hand with family influence. Religious education, it's a part of the continuous interaction with peers in the socialization process. And education has long been seen as an essential tool for socialization to integrate people into society. And religious education is essential for socialization to integrate children into the church. So it's extremely important in today's society, uh, regardless of whether it's religious or secular, because it plays a major role in uh, the socialization of individuals. So religious education, contributes to the socialization in several ways. One way that it does this is by continuing to instill religious values outside of the home. When children go to a private school, they partake in, their regular academics like any other school, but then they also take religious specific studies. And this type of everyday routine, it forms a normal structure, for children. Children also gain the knowledge about their respective religion, oftentimes setting the wheels in motion to obtain more knowledge as they get older. Religious education also carries the religious ideologies from the home to the classroom. So it basically acts as an extension for the parents, unless the parents homeschool their kids. So, if you look at it from a different perspective, religious education helps children become more independent in their faith during the socialization process. They learn at home or church because their parents are there and it's expected. However, at school, children can willingly learn about their religion and form their own religious identity in a sense. And as they grow older, children either become more interested in their religion or become distant, and it can be due to just how much exposure to religion they get outside of the home or at church. Also, going to a religious school brings children into contact with other children who are also being raised in religious homes. Those children are able to see the importance of religion in other kids' lives, and that can impact them almost as much as family influence does. Um, and going throughout the teenage years, we care a lot about our peers' opinions and what they think, and we make decisions based off those opinions. So kids who attend religious education institutes, they surround themselves with other individuals who share their faith, and it keeps them basically wanting to partake in their religion. That's a huge contributor to religious socialization. And lastly, people wonder if being raised in a religious home always results in the person keeping their religious practice active even after they reach adulthood. And to put it simply, some people do and some people don't. There are people who continue on with their religious journeys, and then there are people who just abandon it altogether. We're going to take a look at how different the roads are for people who grew up in a religious home. We have a lot of decisions to make when we approach adulthood, you know, colleges and where to live, things like that. So, along with those choices, we have to choose whether or not we're going to practice a religion that we grew up with or, try something on our own. Um, but, it's all up to the person and how strong the socialization process was for them growing up. Um, on one side of the fence, you have people who decide that they are unsure they want to keep on practicing their religion, and people often question their faith, especially in the early adult years. So, uh, more exposure to other religions also maybe causes them to question the validity of their religious beliefs, and that right there can make them want to abandon their beliefs. But looking at the other side of the spectrum, there are people who get to young adulthood and they completely want to continue and maybe even build upon their religious foundation that was set when they were a child. Uh, these individuals, had a good experience with their religious faith growing up, and that's something that they just wanted to keep going with. Um, in a study by Barry McNamara in 2013, he basically said that parental religiousness, which in this case is measured by church attendance and importance, has been related indirectly to emerging adults' religiousness, which in this case is measured by church attendance, importance, general interest, and intrinsic religiosity. So he's just saying that there's basically a connection between, how active parents were in their religion and, how active those parents, young adults, are in their religion as well. So, oftentimes, when young adults had a positive parental example of religion, they decided to continue their religion as they went on into adulthood and did their own thing in life. Um, and the religious socialization in this sense instilled in them that everything that they did growing up was normal, and that was how they should live their life. Um, lastly, the another aspect of religious socialization that's completely opposite of this is that instead of instilling in them the morals and values of their respective religion, it has caused them to resent that religion, and um, in extreme cases, it's caused them to resent their family. These people still grow up in religious households, and practice religion all their life, but something along the lines went wrong and they just didn't want to do it anymore. So a couple things that we see happen in these kind of things is that they had a bad experience of some sort, or they may even have had a bad experience. Um, so everything that involved during their socialization process, it caused them to question why it is that they did everything that they did when they were growing up, and if there was any real reason to it. Um, that's the other side of the fence, is just um, people gather their own thoughts once they reach adulthood and just decide that it's not something for them. So wrapping things up, how we're brought up plays a major role in our socialization process as individuals. Um, for people who were brought up in a religious family or background, not only did we have non-religious socialization, just like everybody else in the world, but we also had those religious norms that contributed to our individual socialization. Um, at some point in every person's life, we have to choose to continue on the road of our socialization, whether it's religious or non-religious, or just completely abandon it altogether and re-socialize